Greetings from New Zealand. I'm Nanette Moreau, the Utilities Disputes Commissioner for New Zealand. I really would have loved to have been with you today in person, but unfortunately I can't be, but I'm glad that I can speak with you through this medium. I'd like to spend a little bit of time today just talking about utilities disputes and what we do, and also to talk a little bit about the challenges of being an industry-based ombudsman scheme. Just to talk a little bit about us, we provide a free and independent dispute resolution service for the utility industries, and they include things like the electricity, gas, the water and broadband complaints, and I'll talk a little bit more about that as we go through. To do our work, we use a wide range of dispute resolution skills, including mediation and conciliation. Our staff, our conciliators, are trained mediators, and they're accredited through an educational process. About 90 to 95% of our complaints are settled through the work that the team does, and we're really proud of that. We've got a team of about 30 in total. About 20 of those are people who are working specifically on the conciliation and mediation cases, and then the rest are the support admin services. As I say, our conciliators are trained both in mediation and conciliation, and we really try to focus on best practice alternative dispute resolution. Our process is that we have conciliators who actually deal with the two parties, so the companies and the complainants, who would be electricity users or gas users or users of water services. And through using things like three-way conversations, they try to resolve the issues with the parties. If that's not successful through a kind of early conciliation process, we conduct an investigation and get all of the detailed information about what's happened through the complaint, and all the while actually working with the parties to try and get settlement. If that doesn't work, though, and ultimately the parties cannot reach an agreement, I can make a decision, and the process for my decision making is that I first issue a preliminary decision. As part of natural justice, the parties have an opportunity to respond to what I say in my decisions, so my findings, and then based on the information that they provide back to me, the feedback, I then can issue a final decision. And that final decision is binding on our providers, our companies, if the complainant accepts my final decision. And that can be put through a court process to make it a binding decision. As I say, most of what we do is actually resolved, and that really pleases me, because I think the best kind of solution that can be reached is one that is agreed to by the parties, and giving them the control that they have in order to actually deal with it. One of the things that I think is really important in the expo that you're being involved with is what are the challenges for ombudsman schemes, and in particular I can speak to the industry-based ombudsman schemes. One of the really interesting things, and I've been working in this area now for 17 years, is the whole issue of independence. And I always refer to it as walking a bit of a tightrope, because you've got parties on either side who are really trying to get you to go in their particular direction. But our staff are really clear, and I'm really clear, that we're not an advocate for either side. What we're looking for are the facts of the case, and we take those facts and try and come to an independent decision or independent settlement. I think one of the big things with that is that oftentimes companies will say to us that we're just in the pocket of the, of the complainant, whereas the complainants are saying because we're funded ultimately by the industry, that we're in the pockets of the companies. So it is really that fine balance of ensuring that you do have regard to all of the facts that are in front of you. A second challenge that I think we face on a day-to-day basis is fairness. And some of the things that are really critical with fairness, of course, is that we are fair, but we're also seen to be fair. So it's not just enough to feel in yourself that you're fair, but those that are participating in the dispute resolution process have to regard you as fair as well. In our organization, in utilities disputes, we have essentially an independent board. And so it's a board made up of 5 individuals with an independent chair and independent directors. And that has been a really helpful move that we've had, so that we can, with confidence, say to the people who are using our services that we're governed by an independent organization or independent body, and that the commissioner, in my decision making, I'm also independent of the board. So in my role as commissioner or ombudsman, I make my decisions independent of the board, and they can't interfere with that. And I think that's really critical in all organizations of this kind. Another thing that's really important to us, of course, is awareness, and that's people knowing about the fact that they can come to us. So it's got to be easy to use. It's got to be accessible, and we work really hard with trying to ensure that where perhaps there are language difficulties or physical difficulties, that we can respond to that. So we do use things like language line. If people speak other languages, the materials that we provide, some of them our basic complaint information is in 11 different languages. And so we do try to ensure that we are accessible. We do promote access. We've just recently released an awareness campaign. And if you're interested, you can look at it on our website. We also do not charge. So I'll talk in a moment about our benchmarks, but there shouldn't be any cost barriers to getting to our complaint process. So it's free to complainants. One of the things that we're seeing a lot of right now is a lot of disruption, particularly in the electricity industry, with a lot of new kinds of ways with solar and electric vehicles of people using energy, and in particular, as I say, electricity. So one of the challenges really is to think about how we, as an ombudsman scheme in this area, remain relevant. If you've got a small community, say, that is producing their own energy, should they be required to be members of a scheme, of a dispute resolution scheme? And so we're working through the challenges of that. But what we want to, at the end of the day, make sure is that all consumers have access, if they do have issues with their electricity or their gas or their water or their broadband, that there is a place that they can come to. So there's a lot of industry and environmental change going on right now. I think one of the other issues that is quite challenging is recruiting staff, retaining them, and ensuring that they get the proper kind of professional development. As we all know, it's an expensive process to get people trained and up to speed, and it's quite hard if you get a lot of turnover and the kinds of, I know for our organization anyway, the kinds of training that we do is actually very marketable to other organizations. And so we really do want to make sure that we provide ongoing training that encourages and opportunities for our people to stay with us. I just want to drop back to fairness for a minute and just talk about what my scope for decision making is. So in the schemes that I oversee, when I'm making decisions, I have to consider what is fair and reasonable, having regard to a set of different criteria. And one of the challenges, I think, is trying to decide what is fair and reasonable in a particular circumstance. But the kinds of things that I look to for guidance, of course, are the facts of the case. I also look at things like good industry practice and relevant codes that exist within that industry, and rules of natural justice, of course. And also, I have to have regard to the law. And that's been quite a contentious kind of issue in terms of applying the law versus having regard to the law. So I do consider the law, I have regard to the law, but at the end of the day, my fair and reasonable jurisdiction kind of overarches the law as well. I mentioned that we had some benchmarks. These were the things, and our organization has been going since 2001, so we're coming up to 18 years old. But right from the very outset, we relied on a set of benchmarks that were created by the Australian government. And they're now called Key Principles for Industry-Based Customer Dispute Resolution. And if you're interested, we certainly can send you the links for that. They set out a series of 6 benchmarks, and they also set out the basic principle of the benchmark, what the purpose of it is, and then some key practices. And it's actually really quite a useful document when you're establishing your criteria for how your organization is going to work. So I would recommend those to you. Just looking quickly at the benchmarks then, there are 6 of them. The first one is accessibility, and we've talked a little bit about that, about things being free for consumers, that it be open and accessible and meet the needs of the people that are coming to the complaint process. I've talked about independence, and again, as I say, that's one of the really critical things in this role. I think one of the challenges is if you're a decision maker, it's likely that the decision is going to perhaps be in favor of one person, but not in favor of the other. There's kind of the winners and losers. And so the interesting thing about that is trying to carry through the vision of being independent when you're going to have a winner perhaps and a loser. And so that's why I think relying on the facts, what are the facts, and sticking to that is really important. And trying to minimize being swayed by emotion and some of the other kind of things that could pull you away from taking the facts into account. Another benchmark is fairness, and we've talked a bit about that in some of the things that are required in order to keep that balance. Accountability is another one of our benchmarks. So I, as chief executive of this organization, am accountable to my board for the decisions that I make as chief executive. But as I said a few minutes ago, in terms of my actual decision making, I'm basically accountable ultimately to the courts, so that if I make a decision that is found to be judicially reviewable, where I've maybe erred in law, then ultimately the parties can take the decision to court, hopefully not necessarily me, but that can happen as well. And also the other 2 drivers, of course, with any kind of scheme like this are efficiency and effectiveness. So it's that balance again of trying to figure out how you can deliver good quality alternative dispute resolution and investigation where it's necessary without kind of you know, going through 2 years of discovery and all of that. I'll talk a little bit in a few moments about how long our cases take, but efficiency and effectiveness are constant things that we certainly do take into account. And we've got benchmarks, we have performance indicators around what is expected of the team and of me in terms of getting through our work. The other kind of foundation principle, as with any scheme of this type, of course, is natural justice, and ensuring that the parties have access to knowing what is being dealt with, that there are reasons for the outcome, and that they do have the opportunity to input into the process. In addition to kind of looking at complaints, there are some other things, and we've got a favorite tagline that we've developed over the last couple of years of prevent, educate, and resolve. And really over the last few years, we've tried to extend our focus to the prevent and educate and then resolve. So we don't just want to be the ambulance at the bottom of the cliff after the complaint has occurred. What we really want to do is kind of be at the top of the cliff and kind of be maybe a bit of a gate to keep people from going over the side. And so the kinds of work that we're doing in the prevention area, we hold monthly what we call webinars. So these are hour-long focused discussions about particular aspects of either dispute resolution, so it could be on how you deal with particular kinds of disputes, or how you deal with difficult complainants, or how you try and reality test the parties to get to a settlement. And we also do webinars around industry information, so looking at trying to educate the industry in terms of how we would look at a complaint if it's say a switching complaint, for example, where people have gone from one company to another company and it hasn't gone well, and they might, as a result of that, have received a high bill, where a back bill, or there may be a disconnection of their electricity or gas supply, just as examples. We have a number of resources that we use to try and assist with prevention, and it kind of overlaps with our education part of our tagline as well. So we have things like case notes, so those outline some of the features of particular cases that we've dealt with. We also produce practice notes for our providers. And we also have a number of fact sheets, and I'll talk a bit more about those. But again, these are on our website, and they cover a whole range. I think there's about 20 of them now, and they cover a whole range of issues around disconnections and supply and making a complaint. In the education space, we also do both internal and external training. In the internal training area, we do, as I said, want to make sure that our staff are really well equipped to deal with complaints. And we do a lot of work around best practice alternative dispute resolution. And of course, because we deal across so many industries, we also have to provide industry knowledge as well. We also do external training, and that's for our providers. And again, we look at trying to give education around best practice dispute resolution, and also trying to get them to better understand our processes and how we actually work together. And then, of course, the third part of our tagline, which is resolve, and again, that goes from trying to work right at first instance with getting the parties together on a teleconference and getting them to talk to one another, with the conciliator working with the two parties and reality testing through to a binding decision if it's required. One of the big challenges, and I don't know if you have this in the work that you do, is trying to determine what a complaint is. And it's one thing that over the 18 years that I've been with this organization, it's probably one of the more challenging things. That we use the ISO definition of what a complaint is. And so we say that it's an expression of dissatisfaction made to or about a provider where a response or a resolution is explicitly or implicitly expected. And what we find is a lot of the times our providers, our electricity companies and our gas companies and our water company, don't necessarily recognize something as being a complaint. And so they'll call it something like an inquiry, and they don't really get on the front foot to try and get it resolved with their consumer, and then it winds up coming to us after a period of time. And of course the parties are then maybe a bit more entrenched, and it makes it a bit more difficult to try and settle the complaint. So I think being really clear about what it is you can actually look at and what the jurisdiction of your role is, and making sure that that's really explained clearly to the people that you're serving and the people that come to you for decisions is extremely important. Just a little bit about the size of our organization. So as I said, we're roughly 30 people. We have approximately 300 and I think it's 44. It says on the thing. I think we're maybe up to around 350 now, providers and members. And as I said before, it covers things like electricity and gas, LPG, another form of gas, water, broadband, electric vehicle charging. Electric vehicles are becoming quite an important thing in New Zealand, and also installations and that of solar equipment, which again is another area that I think is causing a lot of disruption in the electricity industry. Since 2002, we've handled about 75,000 total cases. I just thought I'd give you quickly an overview of our year-end numbers for our last financial year. So last year we handled over 7,000 total cases. Of those, 4,700 were inquiries, 2,400 were actual complaints. There were 313 cases that were accepted for consideration, where we did a comprehensive investigation. And the average working days to close was about 44 days. So I just want to encourage you, if you are interested, to go to our website to look at the resources that we've got. We do have our brochures, as I say, that are in a number of different languages. We have about 20 fact sheets that cover a whole range of issues that we deal with, and they really talk about trying to explain what terms are and what we look at when we're looking into a complaint, and how we actually can help, what our process is. And that's quite useful to be able to give to parties and to our providers to help them understand what it is we do. I mentioned before that we've got case notes. That sets out in an anonymized way, so it doesn't identify specifically the name of the complainant or the provider, but it does set out what happened in the complaint and then what the ultimate resolution was of that complaint. And that includes commissioner decisions as well. So I would like to invite you to get in touch with me if you have any questions as a result of anything that I've said today, and I'd be happy to liaise with you on that. I'd love to come and visit your country at some point in time, and if there's anything that I can do to assist with the establishment of a complaint process or an ombudsman scheme, please let me know. Also, as I said, I would encourage you to go to our website, www.utilitiesdisputes.co.nz. I should say .co.nz, I guess, and take advantage of the information that we've got there. I wish you all the best for the rest of your expo, and I look forward to hearing from you and perhaps at one day meeting you. Thank you very much.